My daughter's fiancé called me a local homeless person. He didn't know I was a prosecutor. They called it a casual brunch, Eva's word, not mine. Summit Cafe and Bar, all Edison bulbs and fake warmth, the kind of place that charged $27 for omelets and called it authenticity. I arrived early. Old prosecutor habit control comes from being first. Griffin Hale showed up late, cufflinks flashing, smile too white to trust. He leaned back, mimosa in hand. You know, babe, he said to Eva, your dad really pulls off that local homeless look. Laughter. Real. Loud. Damon Hale smirked. Celeste sipped her coffee like applause. Eva froze. Dad, he's joking, she whispered. I smiled, courtroom calm, the kind that frightens men who think cruelty is charm. Of course, I said, adjusting my iPhone. Camera down, audio on. They didn't know silence was my evidence. And when I finally took the mic weeks later, I began with 7 words. I'm Prosecutor Brooks, and I remember everything. I guess 99% of you will hear this, sigh and scroll past, not clicking like or subscribe. Even if it only takes a second. What time is it for you, and where are you listening? They called it a casual brunch. That was Eva's word, not mine. Summit Cafe and Bar, the kind of place that tried too hard to look effortless. Edison bulbs. Exposed brick. Every table topped with a tiny succulent that looked too symmetrical to be real. The chalkboard behind the counter read truffle omelets, $27. Someone had drawn a crooked heart next to it, trying to make it feel human. It didn't. I arrived early. Old prosecutor habit being on time isn't politeness, it's control. I set my Starbucks cup on the table, the condensation ring catching a glint of morning light. My omega ticked faintly against the cup. Across from me sat the Hales, Griffin, his parents, Celeste and Damon, and my daughter Eva, already trying too hard to make everyone comfortable. Celeste was the kind of woman who used perfume like punctuation, sharp, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. She adjusted her Dior handbag on the chair beside her, a soft leather exclamation mark. You must find it quaint, she said. Her voice dipped in honey. Prosecutors and their ideals. Griffin swirled his mimosa, eyes not on me but on his reflection in the glass. Law's just theater, babe. Real power is capital. His tone was light, but there was that little smile, the kind people wear when they believe they're saying something profound. He turned toward me. Your father's what again? County council? Or is it volunteer? I didn't answer right away. Silence is a tool. Damon Hale Sr. filled it with a laugh, too practiced to be spontaneous. Public service is adorable, he said, raising his glass, until the bill arrives. Eva gave a nervous smile, the kind that begged the air to stay light. Dad, we're just talking. Sure, I said. I hear you. And I did. Every word, every angle, every little attempt to paint virtue as weakness. Celeste leaned in, her diamond bracelet flashing. I admire your generation's restraint, she said. My husband's always said people like you keep the rest of us safe. I nodded. That's the idea. Then I watched her eyes flick to my blazer navy, worn at the cuffs, the kind of fabric that had seen too many hearings and not enough parties. Griffin smirked. Damon chuckled under his breath. Eva looked down at her napkin, tracing its fold. Feigned warmth. Casual cruelty. And then the silence that follows when people pretend not to notice either. I could have answered. I could have mentioned the indictments I'd won, the corporations I'd brought to heel, the fact that half their friends whispered my name with polite fear. But you don't win against people like the Hales by speaking. You win by remembering. As Griffin signaled for another mimosa, my mind drifted not forward but back. Ruth, my late wife. I saw her hands, still wet from washing smoke-stained shirts after that courthouse fire years ago. You do the right thing even if they laugh, she'd said. The soap smelled like lilac. She'd kissed my shoulder and told me not to let their noise touch the work. I breathed in once, slow. The air smelled like lemon polish and performance. Across the table, Damon raised his fork, poised like a gavel. You'll love the family dynamic, he said, grinning. We're efficient. Efficient. Another word for ruthless. I smiled, small, deliberate, unbothered. I bet you are. Then I took a sip of cooling coffee and decided, very quietly, to take notes instead of offense. Somewhere behind the counter, a server dropped a spoon. The sharp clang cut through the polite laughter, just long enough for everyone to blink. Only I noticed the crack running along the edge of the chalkboard frame, a thin line splitting through the fake handwriting that read "Good Vibes Only." The kind of crack that starts small. The kind you almost don't see, until the whole wall gives. Summit Ridge Country Club had the kind of over-polished charm that made everything smell faintly of lemon wax and old money. Even the jazz trio in the corner seemed to play in lowercase soft, smug, expensive. The waiter guided me to a table dressed in white linen and silver, so polished it almost reflected gilt. Griffin and his family were already seated, laughing about something I couldn't hear. Eva gave me that tight smile children learn when they start apologizing for their parents' existence. "Dad, you made it," she said, half rising from her chair. Celeste Hale barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, good," she murmured. "We weren't sure you'd find the place." Damon Hale, Griffin's father, smiled the way a man smiles, when he's already decided who's beneath him. "Traffic wasn't bad, Brooks? You prosecutors don't usually leave the courthouse, right?" I didn't answer that. I'd learned long ago that some questions don't want answers, they want evidence. The jazz trio slid into something that sounded like autumn leaves. The scent of Tiffany perfume drifted by, heavy and deliberate. Saturday. My coffee order was still steaming when a cousin, a younger man with a golf tan and the confidence of generational wealth, lifted his glass. Cousin Brent. The kind who introduces himself twice so you don't forget his last name. "Oh, did you invite the local homeless, Griff?" Laughter. Real laughter, not polite. The kind that hits the room like a dropped fork. Celeste didn't correct him. Damon raised his glass as if to toast the cruelty. Eva froze. "Dad," she whispered, low and embarrassed. "He's kidding." "Of course," I said, and I smiled. The kind of smile you learn in court, controlled, unreadable, with teeth that don't touch. I reached into my jacket pocket, adjusted my iPhone, and turned the screen face down on the table. Camera down, audio on. New Jersey is a one-party consent state. Old habits die hard. Griffin leaned back, easy, smug. "We'll fix optics at the wedding," he said. "Get him a better suit, right?" Celeste's fingers danced around the rim of her glass. "Dark navy," she said. "He'll look respectable." Respectable. The word landed like a bruise. I rubbed the inside of my wrist. A nervous tic, born of 1,000 courtrooms where I'd had to stay silent while men like Damon Hale called justice expensive theater. I catalogued every detail the way I would a case. The faint condensation ring on the oak where Damon's glass had sat too long. The missing button on Brent's cuff. The smile Ava forced, brittle as glass. Social microaggressions. Polished surfaces hiding corrosion. They thought I was quiet because I was beaten. They didn't realize silence, in my world, is where evidence breathes. A waiter passed with a tray of oysters, the lemon slices glinting like tiny coins. Damon lifted one, said something about real work being about margins. Brent laughed again. Griffin mimed, wiping a smudge off his cuff, eyes flicking toward me. They were performing wealth, confidence, disdain. It wasn't spontaneous. It was strategy. And Ava, my daughter, was still choosing them, every time she didn't speak. Ruth's voice came back to me. "They can dress cruelty in silk. It still cuts." I watched the chandelier reflection shimmer in my glass, distorted but intact. I smiled for their camera. Then I turned on mine. The kitchen was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint click from the Ring camera every time a raccoon crossed the porch. It was 11:47 p.m. The Wall Street Journal sat folded beside a plate of cold chicken I hadn't touched. I opened my MacBook Air, the blue glow turning the stainless steel appliances into ghostly silhouettes. What had started as curiosity, the kind that eats at you when your gut refuses to shut up, was now a search pattern. Halle Development Group, 3 layers of shell LLCs, 1 youth arts nonprofit, and a municipal grant I'd already seen too many times in my line of work. Public filings are like polite lies, they tell you everything except the truth. But if you know where to look, the gaps start whispering. I scrolled through New Jersey's business registry, pulling entity names that all shared the same mailing address. A suite in Newark that didn't exist until 6 months ago. Then I opened IRS Form 992, the ones charities file when they want to look transparent. Line 1, Youth Arts Futures. Line 5, Donations received $642,000. Line 8. Program services, $611,000. Only problem? No invoices matched the difference. I called Marta, a forensic accountant I'd trusted since the early days of political fraud cases. She answered on the second ring, her voice gravel from too much coffee and too little sleep. See the escrow drift? I asked. Not drift, she said. Design. Damon's signature shows up, disappears, and pops up again 2 levels down. The man's laundering benefactor donations through a youth arts nonprofit. Cute. I leaned back, rubbing my temple. Cute, I echoed. That's one word for it. Marta sighed. Cruel's another. They stole from kids, Walt, from a program that barely had violins to begin with. Outside, the raccoon shadow moved across the frosted glass like an ink blot. I stared at it while the math formed in my head. The Hales had perfected the art of clean dirt, dirty money that smells like philanthropy. Damon was the machinist, Griffin the heir, and Eva the innocent caught in the gears. Send me the raw data, I said. Every transfer over $5,000, every wire that touches that nonprofit's account. Already in your inbox, Marta said. Be careful, though. Damon's not stupid. He's the kind of man who knows when someone starts breathing on his glass. When the call ended, I walked to the whiteboard near the fridge, the one Ruth used to write grocery lists on. I erased milk and paper towels and started sketching a new kind of list. Damon Hale Griffin, Consulting Youth Arts, Futures City Cultural Grant. 4 arrows. 4 paper cuts. Each one small, almost invisible on its own. Together they bled. I stared at Eva's name, scribbled in the corner of my mind instead of the board. I remembered her at 8, running a lemonade stand on our street. She'd charged 50 cents but always handed back change if someone didn't have enough. Fairness, not profit, she'd told me, proud. Where did that child go? I stepped back and looked at the board lines, numbers, connections. It wasn't just data anymore. It was motive, intent. The beginning of something Damon thought he'd buried under paperwork and perfume. The MacBook dinged an email from Marta. Attachment. Escrow summary, PDF. I opened it, scanning quickly. Shells, transfers, signatures, a pattern too neat to be coincidence. The numbers didn't just add up. They pointed. The Bank of America branch in downtown Newark had that antiseptic chill that made every conversation feel like a confession. The AC was too cold, humming just above the sound of printers spitting receipts. A pen was tethered to the counter by a thin metal chain that kinked like a little spine every time I moved it. The teller leaned forward, voice low. She looked maybe 25 smart eyes, cautious tone. She had the expression of someone who knew when to whisper and when to shut up. Those deposits hit every Friday after 4:30, she said, like clockwork, then H'd out Monday at 9:05. I nodded, sliding my driver's license back into my wallet. Recurring memo? She hesitated, glancing toward the glass office where the branch manager was pretending not to watch. Then she said quietly, a star emoji. That was all I needed. The signature pattern of someone laundering money through a nonprofit. Predictable timing. Symbolic memos. Automated withdrawals. Efficiency disguised as generosity. I thanked her, scribbled a note on a receipt slip, and walked out into the damp afternoon. The air outside smelled like car exhaust and fried food from the food truck across the street. I called Marta, my forensic accountant. Star emoji, I said. She exhaled a laugh that wasn't really a laugh. Cute. Probably stands for their Arts for Kids campaign. Probably. Where to next? Field trip, I said. Time to see what those stars actually bought. The music room at Jefferson Middle School looked like a storage closet pretending to be a classroom. Dusty folding chairs, a piano missing 3 keys, posters of smiling children holding violins that no longer existed. The teacher, Miss Foster, met me with a handshake and eyes that carried the exhaustion of too many bake sales. They promised violins, she said. We got 3 certificates and 1 camera crew. I pulled out my notebook. Certificates for what? Outstanding participation in community culture, whatever that means. She gestured toward a file cabinet. We framed one. It's next to the broken bows. She laughed, but it broke halfway through. They told us the instruments were on back order. Then the photos went up online. Damon Hale shaking my hand, Celeste smiling like she'd cured hunger. They called it the Hale Arts Initiative. And the kids? I asked. She opened a closet door. Inside were empty shelves and one cracked violin case. They asked when they could start lessons, she said quietly. I told them soon. I felt my jaw tighten. This wasn't just fraud. This was theater, and the stage was built on children's disappointment. In my head, I heard the soft hiss of Ruth's old VHS tapes rewinding. She used to record Eva's school concerts. Every missed note, every proud smile. She'd rewind them just to hear the applause again. I steadied my voice. Thank you, Miss Foster. You've done more than you know. She gave a small nod, the kind of nod people give when they realize someone's finally listening. I stepped outside and stood on the cracked concrete walkway, looking at the school's faded mural bright paint chipped by time. A camera crew had come here once to sell a lie, and I was going to make sure everyone saw the truth. I opened my notes app and wrote myself a memo. Pattern plus press equals leverage. If they loved cameras that much, I'd give them the biggest stage in town. The Summit Ridge Ballroom looked like money trying to outshine itself. Crystal chandeliers, a string quartet playing something that sounded expensive but forgettable, napkins folded like crowns beside place cards printed in gold script. The air smelled like champagne and lemon polish, the kind of night where everyone's job was to look like they'd already made it. I came alone. No tuxedo, just a gray suit that had seen trials and funerals. In my hand, a small black folder containing subpoena drafts, folded once, precise. Inside my jacket pocket, a pen, Ruth's Mont Blanc, its gold nib glinting faintly like a memory. On the case, her handwriting in faded ink, use this when it matters. The Hale family had thrown the engagement gala as a performance of inheritance, not love, not family leverage. Griffin stood near the stage, drink in hand, surrounded by his entourage of future board members and current parasites. He looked at home under the chandelier light, hair slicked, cufflinks catching the glow. Board tier, guys, he said to the group, half whisper, half shout. Optics game handled. Dad's putting me on the roster next quarter. We're consolidating the real estate arm. Damon lifted his glass, the same smug rhythm as always. To merit, he said, as if irony were an appetizer. Celeste glided over, wrapped in silver silk and insincerity. Eva, darling, she said sweetly, one manicured hand on my daughter's arm. Your father must feel overwhelmed by real infrastructure. Eva laughed softly, practiced, rehearsed. He's fine, Mom. Then, with a look toward me, right, Dad? I smiled, slow. Couldn't be better. They mistook my calm for deference. That was their first mistake. As the quartet slid into Clair de Lune, the noise of networking began, champagne glasses clinking like coins, laughter with teeth. I watched as Griffin and Damon worked the room in synchronized choreography, shaking hands, exchanging promises no one intended to keep. Eva drifted toward me, her expression tight but not cruel. Just tired. You okay? I asked quietly. Please, Dad, she whispered, eyes darting toward Griffin. Don't make this about your job. It isn't. Then blend. That word again. Blend. It was what people said when they wanted you to disappear politely. I nodded. Sure. But as I adjusted my tie, I noticed who was watching District Attorney Lee near the bar, her husband beside her, a friend from law school. Across the room, Marta stood by the buffet, pretending to be fascinated by shrimp cocktails. To the right, an ethics board liaison talking to a local reporter I'd quietly invited through a mutual contact. I'd sent each invitation myself, discreetly, through intermediaries. If the Hales wanted a stage, I would give them one, but the audience would be mine. I moved slowly through the crowd, exchanging handshakes and measured smiles. Griffin's voice carried from across the room, bragging again about future board appointments. Damon laughed louder than necessary, the kind of laugh that forces others to join in. Celeste raised her glass to toast. New beginnings. Ice clinked. The sculpture beside the champagne tower, a swan, delicate and perfect, had begun to drip from the nose, tiny rivulets tracing down its chest. Eva caught me watching it melt. Her eyes said, "Don't." My silence said, "Already did." The gala was theater, and I was seating the audience for the final act. As I left my drink untouched on the table, I slipped Ruth's Mont Blanc into the folder beside the subpoenas. The soft snap of the pen cap sounded louder than the quartet's violin. If they wanted an audience, they would have one I chose. The municipal building was half asleep, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the squeak of a cleaning cart echoing down the corridor. The kind of place that smelled faintly of burnt coffee and paper dust. It was nearly midnight. I had my MacBook Air under one arm, a legal pad in the other. The night guard nodded when I flashed my badge. "Working late again, Brooks?" he said. "Always. I found Inspector Ramirez waiting by the vending machines, nursing a cup of black coffee. His tie was loosened, the day written across his face. "You said you had something," I told him. He nodded toward a file folder under his arm. "You're going to like this," he said, then almost to himself, "or hate it." We stepped into a conference room, lit by one dying bulb. I spread my notepad on the table. "They called from Damon Hale's office," Ramirez began, voice low. "Right after that violin photo op. Said the mayor loved our efficiency. Told us to push the cultural grant paperwork through before Friday." I looked up. "Before the fiscal close?" "Exactly. Who signed?" He slid a printout toward me, 2 invoices, both with the same work order ID. One billed to Youth Arts Futures, the other to a shell LLC called Southport Consulting. Both bore Damon's proxy signature. The total on one, $42,000. The other, $82,000. Sam service. Sam date. I felt that familiar stillness spread through my chest, the kind that comes right before everything breaks open. I hit speakerphone and dialed Marta. She picked up before the first ring. "Tell me you found something good," she said. "2 invoices," I said. "Same ID, different payee." She didn't miss a beat. "Send me the headers, I'll hash them." Ramirez raised an eyebrow. "Hash? Digital fingerprint?" I said. "Make sure nobody claims we doctored the files." Marta's voice crackled through the speaker. "The inflated one's not even subtle. Greedy, not clever." Ramirez snorted. "That's the Hale brand. Can you preserve the email trail?" I asked him. He nodded, tapping the folder. "Already printed and archived in the system. I thought it smelled wrong, so I didn't delete anything. You'll have timestamps, headers, everything." For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to relief confirmation that my instincts hadn't been paranoia. It wasn't just vanity money. It was a structured fraud. I stared at the duplicate invoices, the numbers glaring back under the buzzing light. Each zero looked like an eye, watching me. "Ramirez," I said, "you just connected the dots between charity and procurement. That's not a coincidence, that's a conspiracy." He looked tired, but he smiled. "I just want to keep my job." "You will," I said. "You did the right thing." The cleaning cart rolled past again, a single mop handle rattling in its bucket. The sound filled the silence. Then, for a moment, the air shifted memory, bleeding into present. Eva, age 7, tugging my tie before her first school recital. "Be proud of me?" she'd asked. "Always," I'd said. And I was. I still was. Because even when she stood next to people like Griffin, there was still that child underneath waiting to remember the difference between applause and approval. I took the printouts, slid them into my folder, and sealed the envelope. "Chain of custody starts with care." Ramirez handed me his card. "You'll make sure this doesn't disappear?" I gave him a small, tired smile. "Not this time." As I stepped back into the corridor, the light flickered once, catching the rust halo on a ceiling tile. "Greedy," I muttered under my breath. "Not clever." Then I corrected myself. Not clever. Criminal. The rehearsal dinner wasn't dinner. It was theater, each table a stage, every smile rehearsed. The private dining room at Summit Ridge glowed under antique mirrors and gold sconces. Even the sea base looked sculpted, glistening under the light like it had been coached on posture. BMW key fobs and designer clutches littered the table like trophies. The air smelled like lemon butter and self-satisfaction. Damon Hale stood at the head, glass in hand, waiting for the hush he always assumed he deserved. He wore authority like cologne, loud, expensive, suffocating. "To merit," he said, voice booming. "To legacy built by action, not sentiment. Some inherit names, others earn them." His gaze lingered on me just long enough for the subtext to harden into text. Laughter rippled around the table. Celeste dabbed her mouth delicately with a linen napkin. "Brooks," she said smoothly. "Nothing personal, but tomorrow's photo set is upscale. Family branding." Griffin grinned, hand resting on the back of Eva's chair. "It's just optics, man." "Optics," I repeated quietly, rolling the word around like a bad taste. Celeste leaned forward. "We can seat you later, after the portraits." It took me a moment to realize she wasn't joking. Ava's voice broke the silence, small but clear enough for the room to hear. "Dad, it might be easier." That sentence, a paper cut that turned arterial. The fork in my hand felt heavier than it was. I set it down, slow. "Easier for who?" I asked. The jazz trio in the next room hit a wrong note. Someone coughed. A server froze mid-step, unsure whether to keep pouring champagne. Damon raised his glass again, pretending the moment was nothing. "No hard feelings, Brooks. We're just thinking of consistency. You understand brand integrity." I met his eyes. "Perfectly." Then I looked at Eva, my daughter. Her hands were clasped in her lap, knuckles white. She couldn't meet my gaze. She was protecting something, an illusion, a comfort, maybe just the quiet. Humiliation came first, a hot wave that burned everything it touched. Then something colder settled in its place, clarity. I wasn't losing a seat at their table. I was freeing myself from it. Ruth's old words drifted through the noise in my head. Love isn't exemption from truth. She'd said that once during an argument about Eva's curfew. I hadn't understood it then. I did now. I leaned back, letting the silence stretch until it turned uncomfortable. Damon shifted. Celeste smiled too tightly. Griffin drummed his fingers against the table, trying to sound unbothered. The chandelier above us hummed with trapped heat. I caught the reflection of a lemon seed clinging stubbornly to the rim of a water glass. It felt poetic, something small, refusing to let go. Finally, I stood. "You don't have to worry," I said. "I won't ruin your photos." Dad?" Eva started, but her voice faltered. He adjusted my cuff, calm. Optics matter, after all. A few polite chuckles, the kind that sound like closing doors. I nodded once to the room, once to Eva, and left. My footsteps echoed down the marble hallway, each one sounding like a verdict. By the time I reached the parking lot, the night air had cooled the anger, leaving only resolve. The lights of the ballroom glowed behind me, all warmth and emptiness. So I sat it out and stood up somewhere else. I guess 99% of you will hear this, sigh and scroll past, not clicking like or subscribe. Even if it only takes a second. What time is it for you, and where are you listening? The ballroom lights had shifted to that artificial white that made everyone look more polished, more unreal. The Summit Ridge Country Club smelled like champagne, starch, and quiet ambition. A jazz trio softened in the corner. The Hale name was everywhere on banners, cocktail napkins, even the ice sculpture now dripping elegantly down its pedestal. I stood near the dais, unseen, uninvited, but not unwelcome. In places like this, civility was currency, and no one wanted to look poor. Griffin was mid-toast, holding the mic like he'd been born with one. "To legacy," he said, "to family, and to building futures that look like this." His hand swept toward the chandelier as though he owned light itself. Polite applause followed. Then, almost as an afterthought, he looked my way. "And my future father-in-law," he added, smile flickering, "who's always been grounded." A ripple of laughter. Celeste tensed. Damon didn't. He was waiting for something better. That's when Cousin Brent, a walking punchline in a rented tux, chimed in from the table nearest the dais. "Yield the mic for our local homeless?" Laughter again, sharper this time. Griffin's smile froze. Eva's did too. For half a second I thought she might stand. She didn't. I reached into my jacket pocket, feeling the cool metal of my Lexus keys and the smooth barrel of Ruth's Mont Blanc. It clicked once in my hand, the sound tiny but final. I took the mic. The laughter died as soon as I didn't give it back. "Thank you," I said evenly, "for the courtesy." A tiny moth circled the spotlight above me, fluttering in slow panic. "My name is Walter Brooks." That earned me a few polite nods. Nothing more. "I'm Prosecutor Brooks," I continued, my voice calm, almost conversational. And for the past 5 years, my office has been investigating a pattern of fraudulent contracts, duplicate invoices, and charitable misrepresentation connected to a certain developer, Mr. Damon Hale. You could feel the air change like the moment before thunder hits. Forks paused midair. Ava's hand flew to her mouth. Dad! Griffin's smile cracked down the middle. His fingers twitched like he wanted to grab the mic back but didn't know how. Damon's jaw flexed, slow and mechanical. Celeste stared straight ahead, as if still waiting for the punchline. This isn't a trial, I said, meeting Damon's eyes. It's a courtesy. Some of you are on boards connected to Hale Development. You'll want legal counsel before morning. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered subpoena. Someone else said fraud. Then came the soft metallic sound of phones unlocking, screens lighting up like fireflies as guests started recording. Mr. Hale, I continued, your charity delivered cameras and certificates instead of violins. Your shell companies billed the city twice for one project. The money trail is documented. And the paperwork, I tapped the folder tucked under my arm, moves tomorrow. Griffin's voice cracked. You can't do this here. I looked at him. I already did. Silence. Just the hiss of the champagne tower draining. Eva stood now, tears burning under the stage light. Dad! Why? Because truth, I said quietly, shouldn't need an invitation. For a long second, no one moved. Then, as if on cue, the reporter I'd invited earlier raised her phone higher, recording every stunned face. I stepped back, placed the mic on the podium, and straightened my tie. And then, because truth should have witnesses, I invited them to watch the paperwork move. By the time the ballroom emptied, the noise had turned digital phones buzzing, emails pinging, whispers stretching across City Hall group chats. But I was already home. The guest room desk hummed beneath the soft blue glow of my MacBook Air. The house had the quiet fatigue of an old fridge, steady, unbroken, a sound that said, keep going. Ruth's Mont Blanc sat beside the keyboard, gleaming like a black key waiting for the right lock. It was past midnight. My jacket still smelled faintly of lemon polish from the country club. I took a breath, dialed. Marta, I said. Already drafted, she interrupted, breath sharp with caffeine. Affidavit on the duplicate invoices is in your inbox. Chain of custody verified. Inspector Ramirez signed off at 11:43. Good, I said. Submit sealed. Timestamp the hash. Done. Click. Next call. Ethics Division, came the tired voice on the other end. Brooks, I said, filing prophylactic recusal. My daughter's engagement connects to potential defendants. Wall me the moment the indictments move forward. The line paused. Paper rustled. Understood. You'll be insulated. You sure you want to stay on the periphery? I want to stay clean, I said. Click. Next line. Ortega, came the Chief Ada's voice. He sounded more awake than I felt. We're set, he said. Subpoenas queued. Youth Arts Futures, Southport Consulting, Hale Development, and Damon's executive assistant. Bank subpoenas prep timestamps only. No personal identifiers yet. Send the request to Bank of America compliance first thing. Flag them routine audit. I want the shock delayed, not denied. Copy that. I scribbled a note on the legal pad beside the keyboard. Exact, not cruel. The cruelty tonight wasn't loud, it was procedural. Damon Hale lived in a fog of favors and blind carbon copies. My silence was his isolation. My withdrawal, his undoing. Somewhere in the city, his phone would start lighting up. Donors asking if they should distance. The mayor's council checking if they were mentioned by name. Each call met with the same new wall. Mr. Brooks has recused himself. That line would repeat until it turned into the echo of consequence. I took another call. Mayor's council, I said. Public statement tomorrow. Keep it factual, no commentary. Just confirmation of an ongoing review of charitable contracts. The voice on the other end hesitated. You're really doing this? I'm doing my job, I said. Same one I've always done. The desk drawer stuck at the last inch when I tried to close it. It always did. I left it like that. I sat back and looked at the whiteboard on the wall. Names and arrows I'd drawn weeks ago now crossed out, replaced by neat boxes labeled Evidence, Affidavit, Press Review. Ruth's whisper came to me, the one that lived somewhere between memory and conscience. Be kind. Be exact. I underlined exact in my notebook. Kind would come later. I opened my inbox again. 3 unread messages already stacked at the top. Ortega, filed. Ethics, recusal acknowledged. Marta, PDF hash attached. I exhaled once, deep. This wasn't adrenaline anymore. It was rhythm, command presence reduced to process. Through the window, the first hint of dawn touched the neighbor's fence. Down the street, the hum of early delivery trucks mixed with the whisper of sprinklers. The world didn't know yet that by noon, the Hales empire would start to shiver, credit lines twitching, contracts under review, reporters circling like gulls. I shut the laptop, set Ruth's Mont Blanc on top, and let the silence take hold again. By dawn, the first paper hit the first desk, and Damon Hale's day had already shortened. The winter sun over City Hall had no warmth, just light. Enough to expose, not enough to comfort. Reporters clustered near the stone portico, microphones like antennae, aimed at whoever dared speak. The marble steps reflected the cold back into my shoes. Mayor's counsel, a man who used to call Damon Hale visionary, now read from a printed statement. His voice trembled between authority and apology. Out of respect for ongoing inquiries, he said carefully, the city will suspend coordination with Hale Development Group until all audits are complete. Flashes went off. The sound of shutters snapped like distant gunfire. A reporter called out, "Is Damon Hale a target?" I stepped forward. Calm. Deliberate. Ruth's words were in my head. "Fix the leak, don't flood the town." "Public records speak," I said. "I will not." 3 sentences. Then stop. That was the rule. Precision over spectacle. The murmurs began immediately. Ethics probe. Charity fraud. Insider cooperation. Words were seeds, and I could already see where they'd take root. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. Ring notification. Motion detected at my front door. I glanced at the screen. A small brown envelope slid under the doormat. Not flowers. I opened the message that followed voicemail. A woman's voice, trembling. "This is Ellen Park, the treasurer for Youth Arts Futures. I can't do this anymore. I won't be the front. I can testify." For a moment, the crowd noise around me faded, replaced by the sound of her voice looping in my ear. A witness doesn't just flip, they unravel the whole pattern. "Thank you, Ellen," I whispered to no one. A pigeon hopped between reporters' shoes, unfazed by the chaos. Someone swatted at it absently. It fluttered away. Fragile things survive because they know when to move. By 3 p.m., my inbox filled with ripples. Veterans contractor. "Pending review, we must suspend all Hale development bids. Appreciate your service, sir." School board chair. "Ribbon cutting postponed until further notice." The Ledger, our small-town paper. "City to review HADA contracts. Officials cautious." Each subject line felt like a fault line. Quiet, administrative, devastating. Damon's network ran on perception, the illusion of momentum. I'd just removed gravity. Still, power never collapses cleanly. I sat in my parked Lexus, watching the last of the reporters disperse. They smelled blood but didn't know where to bite yet. Inside the car, the heater hummed softly, the smell of leather and old coffee mixing into something close to fatigue. I opened my notes app and wrote, "Power is responsibility's twin. Don't confuse one for the other. Pull one pin in a network, and 1,000 small lives tremble, contractors, interns, teachers, janitors who just needed a paycheck." That thought sat heavy on my chest. So I recalibrated. This couldn't become a flood. It had to be controlled demolition. I called Ortega. "Ellen Park's flipping," I said. "Get her in for a sworn statement. Handle her gently. She's a witness, not a weapon." "Understood," he said. "You sound steady." "I am." He paused. "Then Hale's not." I hung up, staring at the faint reflection of my own face in the windshield. Eva's engagement ring sparkled faintly in my memory, a symbol now weighed down by consequence. Griffin's smirk would falter soon. Damon's charm would curdle on live TV. Still, Ruth's voice guided me again. "Be kind. Be exact." When the treasurer's voice shook on my voicemail, I understood the next move had to be gentle and exact. Damon Hale never missed a camera. Even under siege, he knew how to stage light. Brioche and Brass, the city's new power breakfast spot, gleamed like a set built for him: marble tables, gold accents, jazz on low volume. Waiters moved through the room with trays of mimosas held like torches. It wasn't an interview, it was theater, and everyone knew their lines. Damon leaned back in his chair, cufflinks flashing, charm practiced to the millimeter. The yolk smear on his French cuff somehow survived 2 napkins, like defiance disguised as breakfast. "We've donated more violins," he said smoothly, "than some prosecutors have tried cases." Laughter staged, obedient, hungry for proximity. A young reporter from the Ledger raised her hand. "Mr. Hale," she said carefully, "is it true your nonprofit's grants were mostly in kind publicity? Cameras instead of instruments?" Damon smiled, benevolent. "If we didn't take photos, how would the city see the good? Transparency matters." More laughter, softer this time, uneasy. The words would read well in headlines, sound crisp on radio. Damon's strength wasn't truth, it was tempo. He filled silence before anyone else could. Across the room, his son Griffin looked proud again, a borrowed smile restored for one more morning. Celeste dabbed her lipstick, serene as always. Me? I wasn't there. Not physically. But by noon I'd seen every angle. 3 reporters had sent me clips out of courtesy or curiosity. One subject line just read, "He's baiting you." I didn't take it. I sat at my desk instead, phone to my ear, Ortega on the other end. "We don't rebut," I said. "We file." "Already prepped," he replied. "Bank records, motion hits by end of day. We'll request timestamps, intermediary accounts, and disbursement trails from Hale Development to Southport Consulting." "Good." "And a courtesy email to the Attorney General's Public Integrity Division. Parallel knowledge, no surprises." "You're surgical when you're angry," Ortega said. I smiled without humor. "That's the only way it counts." I could almost hear Ruth laughing in the back of my mind, an old echo from years ago, after a disastrous cross-exam. "You owned the facts," she'd said, "but you lost the room." Not today. Let Damon keep the room. I had the record. By 2 p.m., the headlines had softened into noise. "Developer defends philanthropy amid scrutiny." A line buried halfway down mentioned ongoing document review. That was all I needed. Oxygen gone from his story, narrative flatlined. I scrolled past the comment section, half outrage, half denial, and opened my sent folder. Subject: Courtesy notification. Financial subpoenas. 2. AG. Public integrity at NIGov. Short, neutral, correct. I stared at the blinking cursor, resisting the impulse to add more. No defense, no jab, no satisfaction. Just silence. Then I called Eva. Voicemail. Her recorded voice was bright, brittle. "Hey, it's Eva. Leave it after the beep." I hung up before it finished. Some part of me still wanted to explain, to bridge the widening space between us. But explanation is oxygen too, and Damon was already choking on mine. The newsroom would dissect his quotes. The contractors would recheck their budgets. The donors would pause before wiring another cent. I didn't have to speak. The ecosystem was already whispering for me. When applause is your oxygen, silence is an altitude you can't survive. The records room smelled like toner and dust. A low hum from the copier filled the silence, steady as a pulse. Light bars swept across the glass like a lighthouse, exposing every grain of truth, one line at a time. Ortega stood beside me, a manila folder tucked under his arm, his face a mixture of caffeine and grim satisfaction. "Here," he said, sliding the first packet across the table. "Friday deposits, Monday outflows. And this," he tapped the last page, "Griffin Consulting." The name sat there like a bruise. I picked up the page, tracing the columns with my finger. "Memo lines?" I asked. Ortega flipped a sheet. "Community engagement strategy." I didn't look up. "Amount?" "Modest, on paper." "Over time?" He exhaled. "Significant." The spreadsheet glittered with transfers that told their own kind of story. Short, precise, dirty. Hale's nonprofit had paid Southport Consulting, which then paid Griffin Consulting, LLC, which listed a home address in Jersey City. Griffin's home. There it was. Charity to shell, shell to son. Clean. Predictably. Criminal. I turned another page and froze. Eva Brooks reimbursement. Event decor. A single line. Small sum. $642.23. It shouldn't have meant anything. But it did. Ortega noticed. She's not central, he said quickly. Looks like they used her as a pass-through. Public optics. I didn't answer. I circled the entry with Ruth's Mont Blanc, the black ink bleeding slightly into the paper fibers. Facts only, I muttered. The word decor sat there, mocking me. My chest went cold. Eva at 10 came back to me, paper flowers, tape, glitter stuck to her hair. Mom likes yellow, she'd said, arranging crepe petals on the kitchen counter for Ruth's birthday. Decor. The word used to mean joy. Now it was liability. Brooks. Ortega's voice cut in. I blinked. Keep the records under chain. We'll need full custody logs before morning. And wall me off from anything that touches Eva. Already writing it up, he said. His tone softened. You sure you don't want to warn her? Not yet. Why? Because emotion contaminates evidence, I said. He nodded once. Facts only. We both stared at the glass partition that separated us from the rest of the office colleagues, moving like shadows, unaware that the air had just changed. I signed the custody forms, my signature smaller than usual, each stroke deliberate. Ortega gathered the papers and slid them into a clear sleeve. You know what this means for Griffin, right? Yeah, I said. It means Damon used his son as insulation, and my daughter as camouflage. I leaned back in my chair, the vinyl creaking. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel anger, just clarity, clean and cold. Love and law can coexist, but not on the same line item. I typed the recusal memo for anything Eva adjacent, attaching it to the case file. The digital timestamp blinked 2:47 p.m., the exact moment I stopped being her father in the case file and returned to being one outside it. The copier light swept again, bright across the glass, and for a second it caught my reflection older, thinner, the lines deeper around the eyes. I didn't look away. Facts only. By the time Ortega left, the room had gone still except for the quiet mechanical shuffle of the machine scanning truth 1 inch at a time. I shut the folder, locked it into evidence, and placed Ruth's Mont Blanc on top. If love is a blindfold, policy is the hand that takes it off. It started on a screen. Griffin's face appeared first perfect lighting, designer blazer, the kind of background you only get from a rented studio. He had that polished humility influencers practice in mirrors. Political vendettas, he said, voice smooth. Personal grievances weaponized through power. I respect public service, but some people don't know when to retire gracefully. The camera panned slightly. Eva sat beside him, hands clasped, posture locked. She didn't speak. Her silence was the script. Then the closing line. We wish my fiancé's father peace and perspective during this difficult time. By the time I finished watching, the clip had 48,000 views, and a comment section divided cleanly down the middle. Ruth would have called it what it was. Performance art. If they choose spectacle, make sure it's honest. That line echoed in my head as I drove to Summit Ridge Country Club, where the rehearsal reception had turned into a victory lap for the Hales. The terrace was aglow, patio heaters ticking, soft jazz spilling from hidden speakers, wine glasses sweating in the winter air. Donors mingled, all pearls and pocket squares. The place looked like money trying to pretend it wasn't nervous. Griffin saw me before I reached the bar. He was already smiling, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. Sir, he said, loud enough for the nearby tables to pause. You're not welcome tomorrow. The conversation died around us. For optics, he added. For safety. I looked past him to Eva. She was pale under the string lights, her dress the color of apology. You're banning her father? I said quietly. Griffin straightened his lapels. My family, my rules. A donor couple exchanged glances. Another leaned toward Celeste and whispered something that sounded like bad look. Celeste didn't answer. She just lifted her glass of wine and smiled into it, eyes glittering. Eva took a step forward. Dad, please, don't escalate. Her voice trembled like she'd rehearsed both versions, one where I exploded and one where I didn't. I won't, I said. And I didn't. I stood still, perfectly still. The camera's phones, of course, had already begun to rise, recording what they thought was humiliation. But stillness is a mirror, and sometimes it shows the wrong person's reflection. Griffin's smile wavered. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I took a small step back 2 feet, no more. Enough to frame the moment cleanly. Now everyone could see who was pushing whom out of the picture. Someone whispered near the champagne tower. That's his fiancé's dad. Another, he's the prosecutor, right? The crowd's sympathy began to shift, subtle but real. Damon's world ran on control, on managing optics, controlling rooms. But control hates witnesses. I nodded once, to no one in particular. Enjoy your evening! And I turned toward the exit. No raised voice, no scene, just gravity, quietly restored. Behind me, the heater ticked, flames cycling with a soft hiss. The sound filled the pause Griffin couldn't. As I walked past the valet stand, I saw one of the club's junior staffers whisper into her phone, eyes wide. The narrative was already mutating online. By morning, the video of Griffin banning the prosecutor father would be stitched, captioned, slowed down, and replayed across 100 feeds. Every word he said, optics, safety, my family, my rules, would sound less like control and more like confession. So I let him build his stage and kept the lights on. The courthouse conference room was half-lit, blinds drawn just enough for daylight to leak through in pale stripes. The sound of sirens drifted faintly up from the avenue below, that constant city heartbeat of urgency. Ortega entered with a folder pressed to his chest. No preamble, no flourish. Just the quiet dignity of someone carrying gravity. True bills on 3 counts, he said, setting the folder on the table. Scheme to defraud, falsified business records, charitable solicitation fraud. Damon Hale, the COO proxy, and the nonprofit's director. I nodded once. The hum of the overhead vent filled the silence. He added, the judge signed the search warrants this morning. Execution order goes out in an hour. Good, I said. He slid a signature page toward me. You're officially off the family. Adjacent strands. I drafted your recusal memo. I uncapped Ruth's Mont Blanc, that familiar weight in my hand, and signed my name with deliberate strokes. Recusal appended. Transfer oversight to you. A paperclip snapped loose and rolled under the table, disappearing into the shadows. It made me think of how nothing ever truly vanishes, it just slides out of sight until the right light hits it. When Ortega left, the room felt bigger, colder. I looked at the copy of the indictment list, each name typed in bold. Damon's at the top. Griffin's nowhere for now. Then my phone buzzed. Ava. For a second I hesitated. I answered. Dad? Her voice cracked. Not like when she was a little girl. This was different shame layered under shock. They served him at the office. I know. You knew this was coming? I did. Did you... She faltered, then pushed it out. Do this to embarrass us? I closed my eyes. I did this to protect the city. Silence. Only the faint hum of static between us. I don't know what to do, she whispered. Start by telling the truth, I said gently. To yourself first. Her breath hitched, but she didn't hang up. That was something. Griffin says you're trying to ruin us. I'm trying to stop something that was already rotting, I said. And you're not us if you know it's wrong. There was a long pause. I could almost hear the sound of her swallowing back tears. Dad, she said finally, I don't know how to fix this. You don't fix it, I said. You stop helping it hide. That ended the call. I set the phone down beside the indictment folder, tracing the edge of the page with my thumb. Ruth's memory came back again. Not her laughter this time, but her patience. The night we built Eva's school project together. She'd drawn a straight line with a ruler across butcher paper and said, Straight lines make strong houses. Boundaries, she meant. Structure. Shelter. That was what this was, now a house being rebuilt from the foundation up. Not revenge, not righteousness, just repair. Outside the conference room I could hear footsteps press staff hurrying down the hall, the low murmur of phones and printers. Somewhere in the city, Damon Hale's office lights were probably still on, his PR team working overtime to package disaster as dignity. I leaned back, letting the tension finally drain from my shoulders. The sun had shifted, the light stripes across the table now warmer, wider. If Eva wanted shelter, she could have it, but under rules, not under rugs. The Summit Ridge lawn gleamed too bright for November. A wind had picked up, tugging at the corners of the massive white tent where the ceremony was about to begin. From outside, I could hear the string quartet tuning notes trembling like nerves. I stood just beyond the roped perimeter, in my old Lincoln issue coat, the one Ruth used to call my armor. My invitation had been rescinded, my presence discouraged, but bans only mean boundaries. And boundaries, when held correctly, keep everything standing. Inside the tent, laughter floated, hollow and rehearsed. Griffin's voice cut through, louder than the music. "Phones away! This is a celebration!" A donor whispered back, her voice thin. "They just raided his office." I watched the ripple travel through the tent walls, conversations thinning, glasses pausing mid-air. Celeste's voice followed, brittle and bright. "Continue the program." But the program had already ended. Downtown, at that very moment, the sheriff's office executed a search warrant on Damon Hale's headquarters. The news alerts began their silent migration across the crowd, pockets lit up like fireflies. The hum of polite panic grew. One champagne flute at the edge of the tower tilted, a degree off, quivering against gravity. The servers pretended not to see. From where I stood, the scene looked like a painting cracking at its frame. Then I saw her, Ava. She stepped out of the tent slowly, veil in hand, her hair undone by the wind. The lace clung to her wrist like a tether. For a moment she didn't see me. Then she did. "Dad." Her voice was small but clear. I turned, the grass crunching under my shoes. "You look like your mother in that light." Her eyes filled instantly. She took another step, heels sinking into the lawn. "I made a mistake." I nodded. "Which one?" She let out a soft, shaking laugh that broke halfway through. "Picking them over you, over us." I looked past her shoulder and sighed. Griffin was trying to rally what was left of his audience. Cameras now pointed toward him, not for celebration, but for spectacle. He shouted something about misunderstanding and timing. No one listened. The quartet stopped playing. "It wasn't me you needed to pick," I said. It was the truth. The wind caught her veil then, lifting it like a ghost, and for one small second I saw the girl she'd been 10 years old, sitting at our kitchen table tying tiny ribbons around paper flowers for her school recital. Ruth had guided her fingers, showing her the knot twice, then once more, until Eva could tie it perfectly on her own. Now she stood here, trying to untie another. "Is it too late?" she asked. "No," I said softly, "but you'll have to walk back through the door you locked." Tears spilled before she could stop them. She pressed her hand to her face, and when she looked up again, the defiance was gone. Only clarity remained. Inside the tent, more donors were slipping away quietly, discreetly, the way power retreats when it's no longer safe to stand near the spotlight. Griffin's voice echoed faintly, pleading now, not commanding. "Ava, come back in." She didn't move. I didn't either. Stillness again, my old weapon. She reached for my hand, but stopped short. Not yet. Not until she could do it without apology, only truth. The tent lights flickered. The champagne tower swayed. Somewhere in the city, cameras rolled as boxes were carried out of Hale Development's lobby. Ruth's voice whispered through memory. "If they choose spectacle, make sure it's honest." So I stood outside the tent, uninvited, holding the line between ruin and repair. She asked if there was a way back in, and I told her where the door really was. I guess 99% of you will hear this, sigh, and scroll past, not clicking like or subscribe. Even if it only takes a second. What time is it for you, and where are you listening? The VFW hall smelled like coffee and starch, the kind of place that never pretends to be grand, just honest. The wood paneling glowed under yellow lights, and along the back wall, crockpots hummed in a soft, communal rhythm. On the stage, beside the flag and a banner that read, "Scholarship Night, Service, Honor, Duty," stood a small folding table. On it, a vase of carnations tucked into an old work boot, and beside it a framed photo of Ruth smiling, flower on her cheek. Eva stood at the podium, her hands folded tight, her notes untouched. Her voice trembled once, then steadied. "I was afraid of looking small," she said. "My father taught me the opposite. Serve quietly. I forgot. I'm sorry." The silence that followed was deep, the kind that measures sincerity better than applause. Then someone clapped one of the veterans in uniform. Another followed. The sound spread, soft at first, then firm. I watched her bow her head, not out of shame, but in acknowledgement. The paperwork had already been filed, a sworn statement delivered to the prosecutor's office, Restitution to the youth arts program, community service hours logged, no ceremony, no press, just action. When it was my turn, I stood slowly. My knees protested too many years carrying ladders and running stairs, but I reached the mic and adjusted it the way Ruth always used to, with care, not force. Ruth used to say, I began, write it down so it holds. A few heads nodded. Some in the crowd had known her. Most just knew the kind of person she was. So here's what holds, I continued. Restitution to the kids program, community service where the work is quiet, and one rule taped to our fridge, one Ruth wrote the night we almost forgot what family meant. I unfolded the small paper from my jacket pocket. The edges were worn, the ink faded but legible. We don't buy reputation with other people's need. A hush rolled through the hall. Not dramatic, just the kind that feels like agreement. I set the note beside Ruth's photo and stepped down. From the front row, Eva met my eyes. She didn't smile, she didn't cry. She just nodded once, the way Ruth used to when something true had been said. Griffin wasn't there. Damon was in court, his name finally stripped of gloss. Celeste's chair sat empty. A white program folded neatly where her purse might have been. The absence didn't sting anymore, it just marked the edges of the new room we'd built. As the evening went on, kids took turns reading essays about service and integrity. A few veterans shared stories, the kind where bravery sounded like exhaustion. Every so often, the crock-pot lids clicked as the steam settled. The sound felt right. When the event ended, Eva and I carried Ruth's photo and the carnations back to the truck. The night air was cool, the sky low and gray. At home, she followed me into the kitchen. The house smelled faintly of lemon polish and thyme. She took a piece of blue painter's tape, smoothed it against the fridge, and pressed the family rule flat against the metal, once, twice, until the corners held. Then she stepped back, hands on the counter, breathing steady. No grand speeches, no second chances promised. Just a quiet kind of repair, the kind that stays. I ran my thumb over Ruth's citizen watch, still ticking on my wrist, its rhythm steady as the kitchen clock. We did it your way, I whispered. For the first time in months, the house went quiet in the right way again.